The role of self-efficacy in self-regulation. Unlike self-esteem, which we described in an earlier chapter as the overall or global evaluation that people make of themselves, self-efficacy refers to how capable or prepared we believe we are to handle particular kinds of tasks. For example, a student may have a high level of self-efficacy for mathematical reasoning, a feeling that she can master any math task she might encounter in a particular course, but have a low level of self-efficacy for critical analysis of English literature. Self-efficacy beliefs occupy a central role in social cognitive theory because of their widespread and significant effects. They help influence whether people think optimistically or pessimistically, act in ways that are beneficial or detrimental to achieving goals, approach or avoid tasks, engage tasks with a high or low level of motivation, persevere for a short or lengthy period of time when tasks are difficult, and are motivated or demoralized by failure. These beliefs are often called the single most important factor that affects the strength of a person's sense of agency. Bandra argues that self-efficacy is more influential than expected rewards or punishments or actual skills because it is based on a belief that one can or cannot produce the behaviors that are required to bring about a particular outcome. Students with the same level of mathematical skill may, for example, have different attitudes about mathematics and perform differently on tests of mathematical problem solving because of differences in their self-efficacy beliefs. Students who believe they are capable of successfully performing a task are more likely than students with low levels of self-efficacy to use such self-regulating skills as concentrating on the task, creating strategies, using appropriate tactics, managing time effectively, monitoring their own performance, and making whatever adjustments are necessary to improve their future learning efforts. By contrast, students who do not believe they have the cognitive skills to cope with the demands of a particular subject are unlikely to do much serious reading or thinking about the subject, or to spend much time preparing for tests. Such students are often referred to as lazy, inattentive, lacking initiative, and dependent on others. They often find themselves in a vicious circle as their avoidance of challenging tasks and dependence on others reduces their chances of developing self-regulation skills and a strong sense of self-efficacy. Self-efficacy can be affected by one or more of several factors and in turn can affect one or more of several important self-regulatory behaviors. Factors that affect self-efficacy. 4 factors that affect self-efficacy are shown on the antecedent side of figure 9.2. Let's see, 9.2, here we go. Antecedents and effects of self-efficacy. Performance accomplishments lead to self-efficacy, as do verbal persuasion, emotional arousal, how anxious, fearful, or agitated we feel, vicarious experience, successes and failures of others, and then the effects of self-efficacy, a selection process, college major, courses, career, sports, social activities, cognitive processes, use of high-level thought processes to solve complex problems, imagining a successful performance, motivational processes, level of effort and degree of persistence, particularly in the face of problems, setbacks, and frustrations. Affective processes, level of anxiety, depression, elation experienced in taxing situations, ability to cope with risky tasks. Performance accomplishments. One obvious way in which we develop a sense of what we can and what we cannot do in various areas is by thinking about how well we have performed in the past on a given task or a set of closely related tasks. If, for example, my friends are always reluctant to have me on their team for neighborhood baseball games, and if I strike out or ground out far more often than I hit safely, I will probably conclude that I just do not have whatever skills it takes to be a competitive baseball player. Conversely, if my personal history of performance in school includes mostly grades of A and consistent rank among the top 10 students, my sense of academic self-efficacy is likely to be quite high. Verbal persuasion. A second source of influence mentioned by Bandura, verbal persuasion, is also fairly obvious. We frequently try to convince a child, student, relative, spouse, friend, or coworker that he or she has the ability to perform some task at an acceptable level. Perhaps you can recall feeling somewhat more confident about handling some task, such as college classes, after having several family members and friends express their confidence in your ability. Emotional arousal. A third source of influence is more subtle. It is the emotions we feel as we prepare to engage in a task. Individuals with low self-efficacy for science may become anxious, fearful, or restless prior to attending chemistry class or to taking an exam in physics. Those with high self-efficacy may feel assured, comfortable, and eager to display what they have learned. Some individuals are acutely aware of these emotional states and their emotions become a cause as well as the result of their high or low self-efficacy. Vicarious experience. Finally, our sense of self-efficacy may be influenced by observing the successes and failures of individuals with whom we identify. This is what Bandura refers to as vicarious experience. If I take note of the fact that a sibling or neighborhood friend who is like me in many respects but is a year older has successfully adjusted to high school, I may feel more optimistic about my own adjustment the following year. We will have more to say a bit later in this chapter about the role of observing and imitating a model. Of these four self-efficacy factors, personal accomplishment is the most important because it carries the greatest weight. As important as it is to feel calm and be free of crippling fear or anxiety, to have parents, peers, and teachers express their confidence in us, and to have successful models to observe, actual failures are likely to override these other influences. In other words, our feelings, the comments of others, and the actions of models need to be confirmed by our own performance if they are to be effective contributors to self-efficacy. On the basis of your own experience, do you agree that personal experience is the most important factor affecting self-efficacy? Yep. What steps can you take to raise the probability that your students will experience more successes than failures? Clear, logically ordered lesson plans that take small steps. Types of behaviors affected by self-efficacy. Bandura has identified 4 types of behaviors that are at least partly influenced by an individual's level of self-efficacy. These are shown on the effects side of figure 9.2. Selection process. By the term selection processes, we mean the way the person goes about selecting goals and activities. Individuals with a strong sense of self-efficacy, particularly if it extends over several areas, are more likely than others to consider a variety of goals and participate in a variety of activities. They may, for example, think about a wide range of career options, explore several majors while in college, take a variety of courses, participate in different sporting activities, engage in different types of social activities, and have a wide circle of friends. Cognitive processes. Individuals with high-level efficacy, self-efficacy, compared with their peers who are low in self-efficacy, tend to use higher-level thought processes such as analysis, synthesis, and evaluation to solve complex problems. Thus, in preparing a classroom report or a paper, students with low self-efficacy may do little more than repeat a set of facts found in various sources. Often this behavior stems from their belief that they are not capable of more. In contrast, students with high self-efficacy often discuss similarities and differences, inconsistencies and contradictions, and make evaluations about the validity and usefulness of the information they have found. Another cognitive difference is that people high in self-efficacy are more likely to visualize themselves being successful at some challenging task, whereas individuals low in self-efficacy are more likely to imagine disaster. This leads to differences in the next category of behaviors, motivation. Motivational processes. Those who rate their capabilities as higher than average can be expected to work harder and longer to achieve a goal than those who feel less capable. This difference should be particularly noticeable when individuals experience frustrations, poor quality instruction, for example, and setbacks such as serious illness. Affective processes. Finally, when faced with a challenging task, the individual with high self-efficacy is more likely to experience excitement, curiosity, and an eagerness to get started, rather than the sense of anxiety, depression, and impending disaster that many individuals with low self-efficacy feel. Before leaving this discussion of self-efficacy, we would like to make one last point about its role in self-regulated behavior. As important as self-efficacy is, you should realize that other factors play a role as well. In addition to feeling capable of successfully completing a particular task, students also need to possess basic knowledge and skills, anticipate that their efforts will be appropriately rewarded, and value the knowledge, skill, or activity that they have been asked to learn or complete. As we noted earlier, students, as well as adults, vary in how extensively and how well they regulate their thoughts, feelings, and behavior as they pursue goals. To help students with poorly developed self-regulation skills become better learners, you need to know what a well-formed self-regulatory system includes. In the next section, we describe a system of self-regulatory processes that has been proposed by Barry Zimmerman, a leading social cognitive theorist and researcher. The components of a self-regulatory system. Self-regulatory processes and their related beliefs can be grouped into one of three categories, each of which ideally comes into play at different points in time in the course of pursuing a goal. Notice how we qualified the preceding sentence by saying that the various categories of self-regulatory processes ideally come into play at different points during the process. Keep in mind that learners can, for example, cycle back to the forethought phase, from the performance phase before going on to the self-reflection phase, begin a task without doing a task analysis, or make self-judgments and self-reactions at any point in the process. The first category of a self-regulatory system's components includes the forethought processes and self-beliefs that occur prior to beginning a task. Next are the performance processes that are activated during the course of a task. Third are the self-reflection processes that occur after a response or series of responses have been made. Because self-reflection influences subsequent forethought processes, this system is critical. Consequently, Zimmerman refers to these three processes as occurring in phases. As you know from earlier chapters, children acquire their cognitive skills gradually. So, in addition to describing the main self-regulatory processes that come into play at each phase, we will also note the developmental limitations you can expect to see if you teach primary grade children. Forethought phase. The forethought phase is subdivided into the categories of task analysis and self-motivational beliefs. Task analysis includes the self-regulatory processes of goal setting and strategic planning. When setting goals, self-regulated learners do not just specify one or more long-term goals, especially those that take time to achieve. Instead, for each long-term goal, they establish a series of near-term sub-goals that are achievable and provide evidence of progress. For example, to accomplish the long-term goal of achieving a grade of A in physics, a self-regulating student will set sub-goals that pertain to number of hours spent per week studying, working sample problems at the end of the textbook chapter, doing homework as accurately as possible, and seeking help when problems arise. As we point out later in this chapter, planning is a necessary self-regulatory skill because the circumstances under which one learns are constantly changing. Thus, self-regulated learners constantly assess themselves and the nature and demands of a learning task so they can select those methods that are most likely to lead to goal attainment. As we also point out later, possessing these skills is of little value if one isn't motivated to use them. This is why the self-motivational beliefs category is part of this phase. Included here are self-efficacy beliefs, outcome expectations, intrinsic interest, goal orientation, epistemological beliefs. In the context of this discussion, self-efficacy pertains to how capable people believe themselves to be about using self-regulatory processes. Outcome expectations refer to what one believes will be the consequences of achieving a goal, such as praise, prestige, increased responsibility. Intrinsic interest can maintain motivation for self-regulated learning in situations in which external rewards are either unavailable or unattractive. Goal orientations, which we discuss in Chapter 11, can be learning-oriented or performance-oriented. Individuals who have a learning orientation are interested in learning primarily for its internal rewards, better understanding of the world in which one lives, increased competence, and are more apt to be motivated to use self-regulation processes than are performance-oriented individuals whose goal is to achieve a higher score or grade than others. Epistemological beliefs refer to what we believe about the nature of knowledge and how we come to know things. There are several types of epistemological beliefs, and they range, particularly when you compare children and adolescents with adults, from naive and absolute to mature and relative. We can believe, for example, that knowledge is certain. There is a correct, clear-cut answer for every question or problem that, once known, does not change, or that it evolves as scholars conduct further inquiries. And if we believe the second thing, we eventually just want to end it all. We can believe that the acquisition of knowledge occurs either quickly or gradually. We can believe that authority figures are the sole source of all knowledge, or that knowledge is also acquired through personal observation, experimentation, and reasoning. Lastly, we can believe that knowledge is composed of mostly unrelated pieces, or that it is organized like schemas into integrated and interrelated bodies. The significance of epistemological beliefs is that they have been shown to affect all aspects of self-regulated learning. For example, students who believe that knowledge is a collection of mostly unrelated facts are more likely to use rote rehearsal tactics than are students who believe that knowledge is best thought of as interrelated bodies of information whose structure is likely to change over time. In the course of doing a research project, students who believe that knowledge is certain and unchanging may see nothing wrong with consulting out-of-date reference materials. Students who believe that learning either occurs quickly or not at all are less likely to persevere with difficult tasks or to try a different approach when their first approach fails than are students who believe that learning occurs gradually and with effort, and sometimes goes ahead by spurts, or at least often goes ahead by spurts. Developmental limitations. In the forethought phase, young children are likely to be more limited than older children in their ability to do the following: attend to a model, such as a teacher, for long periods of time, distinguish relevant model behaviors and verbalizations from less relevant ones, encode a model's behavior as generalized verbal guidelines, formulate and maintain well-defined long-term goals. Let me go back and look at this nice picture they had for us. Phases and categories of the self-regulation cycle. So it goes in a circle, a cycle. Forethought phase, task analysis, self-motivational beliefs. Then it goes on to performance phase, self-control, self-observation, and self-reflection phase, self-judgment, self-reaction. It just goes around in a vicious circle. Performance phase. This phase contains several self-regulatory processes, and again, they divide into two categories, self-control and self-observation. Self-control processes help learners focus on the task and meaningfully process the information they are trying to learn. Attention focusing, for example, involves ignoring distractions, executing a task at a slower than normal pace, and not thinking about prior mistakes or failed efforts. Self-instruction involves describing to oneself, either silently or out loud, how to carry out the steps of a task or process. Tactics, or task strategies, include the many memory-directed and comprehension-directed techniques that we discuss later in this chapter. Self-observation processes, also known as self-monitoring, increase awareness of one's performance and the conditions that affect it, and have been shown to be a key component of self-regulated learning, particularly when sorting through and reading material on the internet. These processes include self-recording and self-experimentation. Two frequently used methods of self-recording are written journals and log books. When done consistently, self-recording can reveal desirable and undesirable behavioral patterns that correspond to particular environmental conditions, such as putting off homework or studying for an exam in favor of socializing with friends. The results of self-recording can lead learners to self-experimentation or trying out different forms of behavior. For instance, a student might change the time and place of study or the techniques that are used to see whether these changes produce better results. Developmental limitations. For the performance phase, you can expect primary grade children to be limited in their ability to do the following. Ignore both external and internal distractions, such as self-doubts and thoughts of prior difficulties. Perform the steps of a task more slowly and deliberately to avoid making mistakes. Provide themselves with verbal reminders of the steps needed to carry out a task. Select appropriate tactics for a particular task. Self-reflection phase. As with the two first phases, this phase of the self-regulatory system is composed of two categories, self-judgment and self-reaction, each of which involves two self-regulatory phases or processes. The first of the self-judgment processes is self-evaluation. Whenever we label our performance as good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable, satisfactory or unsatisfactory, we are engaging in self-evaluation. There are basically four ways in which students can make these self-evaluative judgments. Students can adopt what is called a mastery criterion. This system uses a graded scale that was created by someone with extensive knowledge about the range of performances for that skill or topic. The scale ranges from novice to expert. By using a mastery criterion, learners know where they stand with respect to an absolute standard of performance and whether they are making progress with additional study and practice. Students can compare their current performance against their own previous performance. Students can use a normative standard. This involves comparing one's performance against the performance of others, such as classmates, rather than some external standard. In fact, evidence suggests that students prefer to compare themselves with similar peers, same gender, age, and race, for example, who perform better than they do. Students can use a collaborative standard. This method applies to situations in which an individual is part of a group effort. The student would make a positive self-evaluation if he or she had fulfilled those responsibilities identified as necessary for the group to succeed in its endeavor. casual attribution, as we also cover in Chapter 11 in the section entitled Explanations of Success and Failure, Attribution Theory, is the second self-judgment process. It involves ascribing a major cause to a behavior. A student's successes and failures can be attributed to effort, ability, task difficulty, and luck, among other factors. Students who attribute their successes to effort and ability and their failures to insufficient effort are more likely to engage in self-regulated learning behaviors than are students who attribute success to good luck or easy tasks and failure to bad luck or low ability. The self-reaction category is composed of self-satisfaction and adaptive inferences. Self-satisfaction is the positive feeling we get when we know we have done a job well and achieved whatever goal we established at the outset. Think of it as self-reinforcement, which is the label used for it in Figure 9.3. Adaptive inferences are the conclusions that learners draw about the need to improve their self-regulatory skills. Learners can, however, make defensive rather than adaptive inferences. These individuals see no need to improve their self-regulatory skills because they have little interest in the task at hand or feel incapable of developing the skills necessary to successfully carry out the task. Consequently, they resort to such maladaptive behaviors as helplessness, procrastination, task avoidance, apathy, and disengagement in an effort to protect themselves from the adverse effects of an anticipated failure. Teachers can, however, affect the direction of students' adaptive inferences. Students who view their teachers as being emotionally and instructionally supportive are more likely to engage in help-seeking and are less likely to conceal their learning problems than are students who view their teachers as hostile and coercive. Developmental limitations. For the self-reflection phase, expect primary grade children to be limited in their ability to do the following. Compare themselves to peers as a basis for judging their own capabilities. Young children's belief about their capabilities are more likely to be influenced by teacher feedback than by comparisons to peer performance. For older students, the reverse is true. Make appropriate attributions for their successes and failures. In the primary grades, the concepts of effort and ability are not clearly distinguished, so effort is viewed as the primary cause of success and failure. Older students, however, are more likely to ascribe success primarily to ability and failure primarily to insufficient ability. I wonder if that's because there's such low effort across the board. Accurately assess the level of their own capabilities. Primary grade children are likely to overestimate what they can do if they have learned only some aspects of a skill, or if they use incorrect learning or problem-solving skills that accidentally produce an acceptable outcome. Conversely, young children can underestimate their competence when they are uncertain about the correctness of their responses. Now that we've laid out the basic structure of social cognitive theory and described its major focus, self-regulated behavior, we can turn our attention to how the concepts of self-regulation apply to classroom learning.